Oh, puppies and kittens. I did a video a couple of days ago where all I was doing was showing the Senate hearing in Arizona, and how these Republican senators were arguing that the gun issue was anything but the gun. I thought it was interesting how they would argue that, how they would blame mass shootings on atheism was the first one, and someone else came in and said that he blamed unwed mothers, which I think is hysterical, especially when you consider that these are the guys that are trying to take away a woman's right to choose at the same time. And he says that the shame of unwed mothers is on their foreheads, as if as if unwed mothers were what caused, the mass shootings, any of them. So anyway, an assembled small group of family and friends. This is my longtime best friend from back in the day, my buddy Kurgan, my son, Ulfürst.
Your longtime son, Ulfürst.
And some of you will know Jim Hall, also from Atheist Edge. So welcome, guys. Wanted to get each of your opinions on whether there can be sensible gun legislation, whether it's happening here or anywhere, what could happen here and so forth. Who wants to take that over? Who wants to start that?
I don't know if I want to be
Go
first.
Jump right into.
Go Ulfürst.
I'm gonna say that one of the first things that we need to sort of acknowledge is bans are definitely not common sense gun control.
You mean prohibition doesn't work?
It's almost as if we've tried that several times with several things and it never worked.
Yeah, I hear you. So that brings up Beto's thing. Beto running for governor, I would love to have almost anybody but who we have right now.
Yeah.
However, I think it's frustrating that Beto said that one of the points that he's running on is that he doesn't think that he specified AR-15s and said that he doesn't think that civilian people should have AR-15s, and that anybody who owns one legally now should have it taken away some way.
Yeah,
I don't know how he meant to do that, but he said that people who own them now should not be allowed to continue to own them.
Like an Australia type deal where mandatory buyback.
Well, I figured that Australia was going to come up in this conversation sooner or later. So
how could it not?
I did a bit of research on that, and despite the buybacks, Australia actually has more guns now than it did before the buybacks. It's just
that's right. But the mass shootings are back now too.
Yeah, they also have had mass shootings.
For 26 years, there were no mass shootings once the agreement in 1996, and then there wasn't a mass shooting until the laws got repealed, chipped away slowly by conservatives, and then they the same year 2018 that basically all that reform was eroded. The same year, guess what happened? Mass shooting.
Well, I have found other things in what I was looking into. So 26 years ago, 1996, Australia has a mass shooting with 35 killed, 24 injured. In the 26 years before Australia's gun control laws, 66 people died in mass shootings. In 1996 alone, 41 people died in mass shootings. In the 26 years since gun control laws were passed, 42 people have died in mass shootings. Spree shootings in the 26 years before 1996, 4 of them. Spree shootings in 26 years following 1996, 7 of them. Mass killing deaths in total in the 26 years before 1996, 127. Mass killing deaths in the 26 years after 1996, 159. An extra 30 people have been killed in mass killings of any sort since 1996, compared to the 24 more who had specifically died to bullets before 1996.
So the 1996 reforms didn't do anything?
Well, it did do some things. It concentrated the amount of gun ownership from, so many people have so many guns to fewer people have more guns.
So fewer people have so many guns.
It also led to more mass killing deaths via other methods, mostly fires in this case. But it's also worth noting that in Australia, the vast majority of mass shootings, because there is a bit of a, what is a mass shooting? That's why I listed spree shootings separately from just mass shootings. A mass shooting in Australia is just anything where 2 or more people got shot. So that's American. And that's
okay.
not even all, it's tricky. But it's just 2 or more people got shot. That's what we've got. In most of these cases, even cases where 5 or 10 people got shot, it's still mostly people within the same family getting shot, or like close friends and neighbors and relatives. It's not mostly a guy going out and shooting up a mall or a school or whatever like that. But it also wasn't mostly that before. 1996, they had 2 big shootings like that, and they've had a couple before that and a couple since that. But for the most part, Australia just doesn't have those. They didn't before, and they still don't now.
When I put that video up a couple of days ago, I was getting a lot of, I have an international audience, so I'm getting a lot of people from the UK and everything who seem to go right along with listening to the senators and their impossible excuses that, they're not going to do anything. They pretend that they care, but they're not going to do anything, and they just blame things that are not the issue. Anything but what the actual issue is. And I had some people criticize me over what they thought a leftist would say that I, in fact, did not say. I was criticized for wanting to ban guns. I never suggested banning guns. I don't personally believe in banning guns. I do think that there are legislative things that could be, common sense things to do. I think that that one, for example, is we've looked at all of these mass shootings. Most of them have been performed by 18-year-olds, one 19-year-old, one 17-year-old, but a bunch of 18-year-olds. And so it made sense to me, and Johns Hopkins did a study that supported this, that, you just raise the minimum age to buy a semi-automatic rifle, raise it to 21. And that also coincides with the age that the youngest veterans would be coming home trained in such weapons. And we know that, whether it's testosterone levels or maturity levels or comprehension, whatever the hell it is, at 18 years old, they all seem to be in the right position for the maximum potential of extreme violence. And that if you push that back 2 or 3 years, most people mellow a bit. And those who don't, like this guy, maybe he hadn't started shooting people yet, but he was already shooting his mouth off in social media. And so at least if you raise the age limit to buy the gun, well, then we would have other means of red flagging this guy for the things he was saying in public media that would have called attention to him.
This guy was also torturing animals and other stuff. Like there was plenty of red flags with this guy, and we're skipping ahead on my notes of stuff I wanted to touch on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I just want to give people a background on my position. I think everybody in this room is a leftist, and most of us, if not all of us, are all gun owners. I'm not sure about Jim, how he politically identifies, but I think we're all left of center, and so that's
absolutely
our positions are probably.
I've got a license to carry, and I'm willing to give it up. I'm willing to give it up. I don't want to see any more kids die. I'm willing to give up my right to own a handgun. If that's what it takes.
Here's one of my thoughts on that. It was when they made it out. We were from Arizona. My son was born in Arizona. My buddy Kurgan lives in Arizona. And I used to spend some time in Arizona for years, and they had open carry like seemingly forever. As long as you hadn't committed a felony or had domestic violence, whatever, you can carry your sidearm as long as people can see it. And we moved to Texas, and suddenly we didn't have that right. And that's when I would see like drive-by shootings and everything. It was the only time I ever wanted a gun was when I suddenly couldn't have one. Isn't that strange? But then Texas started allowing that people could carry guns again. And I liked when they had to think about doing where you have to go to do the license to carry training, because I think that's necessary. You should do that. And if nothing else, for your own protection, because there's a whole lot of people that don't realize how the law applies when you carry a firearm. If you ever pull it out of the holster, and sometimes even if you don't, if you just go into someplace with it and keep it in the holster, you could be liable for a number of things. So people should have this kind of training. And my thought was that all these people would go through the trouble, they would pay the money, they would sit through the classes, they do the time to have this privilege that they worked for and earned. Now they can carry this concealed firearm. And then suddenly they just pass a law that everybody can carry it concealed. We don't, no licensing necessary, just everybody have a gun.
Again, as Jim was saying earlier, chipping away at what would make sense and slowly just freeing it up so that anybody can carry. And it's just fed into the culture that's actually allowed for this anyway. Ultimately, I don't see it again as a gun issue per se. It's nothing more than a tool. That is truth. Anybody who understands firearms knows that it has one purpose, and that is to kill. You don't take out a gun to scare somebody. You don't take out a gun for any other purpose than to kill.
Yeah, people comment. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
All right. People criticize me for wearing a knife in a state where everybody has a gun. But if I have to pull out my knife, if I have a reason to have a knife, I don't need to involve emergency services. Usually,
unless you hurt yourself.
Which you're known
Aaron Raw with a knife that big scares me way more than someone with a gun.
Generally, I mean, obviously, I also live in Texas, so I could carry anytime I want, carry a gun. And sometimes I do. But more often than not, when I go out, I just take a knife, personally. But I do sometimes wear my gun. I also do need a gun sometimes for work. I am licensed as a bodyguard and do work sometimes as a security guard with a loaded firearm. So,
are you still a bounty hunter?
No, but I'm still licensed to be one.
Okay.
But so we run into a few issues here. One is the question of what laws would work, what laws would be reasonable to impose, and what the actual problem we're trying to address is. So a lot of the time, a lot of people, especially after a shooting, they get very emotional and they want action. It's an understandable thing. Something awful happens. You want to do something about it. Unfortunately, we have this false narrative between both of our major political parties. The Republicans don't want to do anything about it. They don't care. And so they just deflect and pretend there just isn't a problem at all. Meanwhile, Democrats also don't really want to do anything about it and aren't willing to do anything about it and aren't able to do anything about it because, well, they're Democrats. And when have they ever gotten anything done? So they just go to the extreme the other way. They say, oh, well, let's ban the guns. Let's do this, that, and the other thing that they know is never going to pass. They know that. That's why those are the arguments they make. That's why we don't get nuanced studies. That's why we don't get studies at all. The NRA, prevents those from happening. But also, it's just so that both sides can keep us increasingly divided and at each other's throats about two unreasonable ends of a spectrum. One where we just say, fuck it, I guess a few hundred kids have to die every year. And another where we just say, oh, fundamentally change everything about this country, the way it works, how things get passed, everything, because, well, that's what would solve the problem, even though it wouldn't necessarily.
I have to read some super chats. Joe LaFaro for $25. Please consider supporting the charities Brady Campaign /Action and /or Sandy Hook Promise. Then we have another one from Anthony Watson for $10. Hello, Mr. R and Ra and everyone else. How are you tonight? Been a huge fan of yours for a while. I want to thank you for teaching me via your YouTube channel And then one more. Well, thank you very much for that. And then one more from Sean Alexander for $20. As long as politicians have their lips vacuum sealed to the sphincters of gun lobbyists, I love that poetic language, we can't count on any meaningful change. Yeah. So eloquently phrased there.
We don't even just have a problem with just politicians. We also have a problem with policing and mental health. And I want to come back to the mental health thing later. You know what? Actually, I'll just go into it right now. Yeah. We don't treat the mentally ill at all appropriately in this country. And one of the things that a lot of people suggest as a common sense gun control measure is mental health screenings and red flag laws, where you can effectively say, hey, I think that person is mentally unwell. Can you please go take his guns away? But I foresee several problems with that. The first of those problems is not everyone who has any diagnosable mental illness shouldn't be able to have a gun. For one, there's lots of mental illnesses that do not make you a threat to yourself or others. And then for two, there are a lot of mentally ill people who are more commonly the victims of violence than the perpetrators of violence. So by taking away guns from anyone who maybe got depressed one time, you maybe are reducing rates of suicide. You're maybe reducing likelihood of, a mass shooting, maybe. But you're also stripping lots of people. I would argue probably more people in this country are mentally ill than not, in one way or another, of their right to own a gun just because.
Yeah. We have a friend in common, a friend of the family that is schizophrenic for as best as we can tell. And we have been unable to get him help because the way the laws in Texas are set up is we were told that if we could trick him to going into a hospital where the police in waiting could then abduct him once he was in the hospital, then we could get him treatment. But it would take that. And then when he got arrested, which he tended to do because he thought people were throwing their voice at him. He thought everybody in the country was a ventriloquist and that people were throwing their voices at him. And so he would get into fights with people like on public buses or in a laundromat or whatever. And so he ends up in jail, and I go down to the jail. I'm like, okay, you got the guy now. He's in the cage. Let me fill you in on the background, and let's get this guy some help. But again, you can't do that. So there's no way to convince somebody. There's no way to convince somebody that they need mental help. They have to decide that they need it in order to get the help, apparently. And then there's no insurance for that. So what do you do?
There's also the issue of getting the person. I mean, in that case, he was already arrested, or you'd have to lure him to a hospital. But in the case of, I mentioned the red flag laws, then that would be you'd be calling the cops on somebody else, telling the cops, this person is mentally ill and armed. Please go disarm him. And let's not even fucking kid. That would just get those people shot. You try and actually realistically red flag law somebody because you think they might be possibly a threat to themselves or somebody else, then you just get a SWAT team kicking down their door and shooting them Breonna Taylor style.
Yeah. Is there a point in even bringing up the fact that my friend, the friend we're talking about right now is also black? And so therefore that's a further complication on why you can't do that sort of thing. I mean, he and I were driving down the road in an old 4-wheel drive that had the huge mud tire, so it makes a bunch of noise. It's got headers on it, makes a bunch of noise. We can barely hear each other as we're going down the freeway, but he thinks with the windows rolled up at night, he thinks that the car next to him, that the driver is throwing their voice at him. This is obviously a mental problem, right? I can't reason with the guy that, hey, if I have to yell at you from inside the same car, how do you think they're able to throw their voice at you from inside a closed car in the freeway? And they can't, you're black, very black, and it's dark. They can't even see you. They're not throwing their voice at you. But there's no way to reason with somebody who obviously, who has a mental problem. But then how do you get them help in that same case, in this state?
Go ahead, Jim.
I want to address something Ulfürst said, that these red flag laws, that's new to me. Are those proposals? Those are not on the books yet. As far as I know, the only thing that can mental health or addiction wise that can keep you from owning a firearm is if you've ever been institutionalized. So what are these red flag laws?
They're
It's a proposal.
They're
It's a
proposals.
proposal
Okay.
that a lot of people have been advocating for, but a lot of those people, I think, don't really think it through. And you only have to think it through so far as I'm calling the cops on someone and telling them that they are mentally ill and armed.
Oh, wow.
Anyone that knows this country knows step 2 on
Well,
that.
besides, I also see that as being way too easily abused anyway.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get people who get called on who, just because it's a prank or what have you. There's been plenty of that. So those proposals wouldn't work for that reason alone.
It's one of those things that sounds great on paper because so many of these shooters, there are red flags beforehand. You can be like, oh, why wouldn't somebody do something? This guy was clearly out of his mind. The answer is, sadly, life is more complicated than that. And it is hard to get someone who is in a bad place, mental health, like help, because we just treat them like criminals. And as long as our police system works the way it does, a lot of measures like red flag laws that might work otherwise are just not viable. They're just not, because you would only be causing more violence in the immediate.
You said before we went live that I think the Uvalde shooter was people that knew him prior to this, that he committed violent acts on small animals like pets. Is that what? Okay, because that is a major. I think that would count as a red flag, right? Because that's one of the big symptoms of psychopathy.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that can be red flags, but then also we do run into this weird problem where even at times that it might seem appropriate, we get very inappropriate responses from law enforcement. We've got, guys like this guy who, torture small animals and have a million red flags. Guy is clearly not well and nobody does anything. But then also we've got cases like myself. When I was 8, I was arrested, put in handcuffs by police who searched my pockets and backpack for swords and axes and bombs.
He was arrested for terrorism.
I was
at 8 years old.
At 8 years old, I was arrested for
terrorism. And that was a funny conversation for me to have with the principal, by the way, because he made the comment and with some levity.
I had watched the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings, and the next day I went to school and I told a classmate about a dream that I had based on that movie, where the plot of land where the school was had a castle, and all my favorite teachers and students were all knights defending this castle from orcs. So he told his mother, who told his father, who told the teacher, who told the principal, who told the superintendent, who told Homeland Security. Yeah.
So I end up having a conversation with the principal where I have to explain, where he's telling me that he used the words criminal mastermind to describe this 8-year-old boy. And he's telling me that I should be so very concerned about terrorists in this day and age because of what my son had said about, having medieval weapons or whatever and going to melee combat and that. And my answer to him was this: I'm seeing the glory of the burning of the school. We have tortured all the teachers. We've hung the principal. Our truth keeps marching on. I'm like, whose generation wrote that song that we all sang when we were in elementary school? But if you sing that song now you're a terrorist. If you sang it then, you're just a boomer. So there's a huge double standard.
So the thing is that occurred obviously with Ulfürst. And also, back in my past, at the time, my youngest son, when he was 11, had 2 Phoenix police officers show up at my door for making threats to other students at school. And when the police officers arrived and they explained to me why they were there, they asked me if I owned any firearms. And my response was, no, I don't. And the question that caught me off guard was, well, why not? That's Arizona for you, because they just assumed that everybody here owns a firearm. And so when they asked me why I did not own any firearms, I explained that it was because of my 11-year-old who could get into anything. And so it comes back to a matter of responsibility as well. One of the things that I see as potentially helpful and sensible would be raised liability for anybody who's providing or giving access, easy access to firearms to somebody who is prohibited. Currently, I think there's only one case that I've run across where a parent has been held responsible, has been charged as well. Outside of that, anybody who provided access to the weapons, because it's not always these kids going out and buying the guns. A lot of times it's just whatever's in mom's or dad's closet, whatever's in my uncle's gun safe, where they have easy access. I was responsible enough when my son was younger to understand that the potential was there. And because of that, forewent my right to actually arm myself. Not because I don't appreciate firearms. I do, and definitely have a view on why we are allowed them. But at the same time, my own responsibility at that point played more of a role in it. And that's part of where I see an issue in the culture itself, is that a lot of people don't want to take responsibility for their actions or their children's actions. Again, it comes back to it not being the gun. The gun's nothing more than a tool. How responsible are you with teaching gun safety to begin with? How responsible are you for paying attention to potential issues that your child may be having? Child, grandchild, what have you. Go ahead.
That's actually one of the things that no one has, to my knowledge, actually suggested, but I think would probably be a good idea, would be if we were to teach gun safety in schools. Like, we can talk about the idea of you have to take a gun safety course as part of a licensing thing, but it would be best if everyone just knew how to be safe with guns.
It's interesting you say that, because when I was in junior high in Texas, in Dallas, that actually was a course that was offered to junior high students.
Definitely can't get it anymore.
As well as hunting safety, a lot of the stuff. And it was in junior high, and it was an actual class that you could take. It wasn't an after-school program. It was actually part of the curriculum that you could sign up for. And it was a regular class that took over part of gym.
Switzerland has something similar. Boys and girls, school age, grade school age, they have competition shooting, and it's just common with their culture. And the Swiss own weapons at similar rates as us. I think it's 1 in 3 owns a firearm there. And so
I understand Norwegians. I understand Norwegians
Norwegians
also have quite a few guns
Mm-hmm.
and are very proficient with them, but they don't have the tendency toward mass shootings that the United States has. So there's definitely a difference in the gun culture. I don't mean to interrupt, but I need to read a couple more of these chats. So Smeggy42, I can guess what shows he watches. Thank you for having a nuanced conversation. I appreciate that. That was my point. I support Second Amendment unconditionally, but it's always nice to hear other views. Thank you very much for that. And 1999 from Jake Cleaver. Hey, Aaron, love everything you do, and I'm loving this conversation. I also like the fact that you invited the Terminator onto your show tonight. I told you, Ulfürst, you were going to get that. Yeah.
Hey, that's fine.
What do you want from a kid who is a security guard, bounty card, kung fu instructor, bounty hunter,
fugitive recovery agent?
Yeah, he just doesn't get enough opportunities for physical conflicts. And then Canadian $5 from Radio Chaos. Didn't the GOP block legislation that would make people on no-fly lists being prohibited from owning firearms? Anybody want to address that?
That's not on my list. I've got here's what will get you you cannot own a weapon if you've ever been a felon, a fugitive, a minor, a history of addiction, a dishonorable discharge from the military, institutionalized for mental illness, and that is it. I like Aaron's idea of upping it to the age 21. I thought about high capacity magazines. That's huge. I'm seeing in the live chat, except for the fact that a magazine is just a box with a spring and 3D printers exist. So that would be super hard, because the only difference, the rate of fire of an AR-15 and a semi-automatic pistol is the same rate of fire. The only difference is how many rounds can it hold. It's the only difference. If you're trying to get rid of AR-15s, it's got to be for magazine capacity. It can't be for rate of fire, because it's the same as a pistol.
And the reality is, go ahead. And the reality is, it doesn't matter the size of the magazine. Anybody who spends any time with their weapon will know how to change out a magazine fast enough to make that point moot.
Yeah.
There's exactly, I've thought about that a whole lot myself. And as someone who is familiar with firearms, I can swap mags in the dark super quick.
Yeah.
But some 18-year-old who's never actually shot before, who just stole his dad's AR, maybe can't. In fact, he might be such a bumbling dipshit that he might not be able to seat the next mag properly. So it has occurred to me that if he does have 100 rounds on tap for that first go, he might have an easier time getting through 100 than if he has to change his mag a few times.
Right. But also you're
still so minor in the grand scheme of everything.
Well, and on top of that, when you say 100 rounds, you're talking drums versus, even extended magazines typically aren't going to hold that many rounds. It's drums typically. And well, good luck struggling that up anyway.
Somebody, Jake Cleaver for 1999 says, I would like to take this moment to appreciate Kurgan's Motorhead poster on his wall. Rip Lemmy, giving you the horns, Kurgan. And then Torius Storm Shield says, most of the major gun control arguments people are putting forward these days are already in the law, but the laws aren't enforced. We need to enforce existing laws before adding new ones. Love you, Aaron. And that's something else that I need to get into. One of the things that I was criticized about, there was a lot of things that I was criticized about in that video. If you ever mention gun control and just mention the word, then the comment section will light up from people accusing me of saying all kinds of things I never said. And I mean, I even wore my revolver when I made that video just to make the statement that, hey, I'm a gun owner myself. I'm not saying take guns away, but people still made that accusation. Maybe because I didn't wave it around. I was just wearing it, So I don't know what the problem is. But one of the criticisms I got was over my definition of an assault rifle, which I didn't give a definition. And I don't think it matters even what the military definition is, because what legislators go by is often a very different definition than I would use.
I'm dying to hear what your definition is, though.
Well, I wasn't sure. So, I mean, I had to look it up. I knew that legislators were going to be using a different one because there are people proposing a ban on assault weapons now when that ban had already been issued. So I don't ever expect politicians to be necessarily polished on the things they pontificate about, but it is probable that they're calling for a ban that already exists.
No,
but one of the things. Go ahead.
The assault weapons ban actually went out. What became, first of all, it was unenforceable. It was absolutely ridiculous. What we're calling assault weapons, or so. Take AR-15s out of civilian hands. It is a civilian weapon. It is not a military weapon. It is based upon a military weapon, but it's a civilian model. Thus the reason why the selector switch doesn't have that nifty extra click to a full auto. Exactly. So the things that made an assault weapons ban when the law was still in effect, and it is not in effect anymore, were things like a collapsible stock, a bayonet lug, pistol grip. And these are all things that really don't do much in the way of making the weapon any more lethal.
Kurgan, you got them all, man. I had them listed. Bayonet lugs. Oh, flash suppressor. You forgot. And
flash suppressor as well.
The broomstick
grip. The definition.
Which are all just aesthetics. They don't add to the lethality of the weapon.
The definition that I got that seems to be the most consistent, and there is discrepancies from the people who are calling me ignorant, they can't agree among themselves what an assault rifle is or what an assault weapon is, because people in the chat right now are criticizing. Right now, they're criticizing my ignorance for using the word assault weapon versus assault rifle. Because
And really,
you just
that's-
can't win. You just can't win when it's a hot topic like this. But somebody
Speaking
said,
of the chat, I'd like to point something out. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, AR-15s are so much more dangerous than pistols, and it's AR-15s that are being used in all these school shootings, not pistols." More mass shootings, school and otherwise, are done with pistols than with AR-15s. The AR-15 is just a really well publicized gun, and it's
Most
also a very
popular-
common gun, so it does come up a
most-
lot, and the news loves calling things AR-15s, whether they're AR-15s or not.
Most
Also, on
popular
the topic of
rifle.
power, AR-15s they are more accurate. Somebody said they're more accurate. They are more accurate because, you can hold it with two hands, but you can actually get a pistol with all kinds of attachments so that you can basically turn a pistol into a rifle. But beyond that, pistol rounds are less pointed and more mass, less powder. So they actually impart more kinetic energy into the target than a rifle round does. So you'd actually take more damage getting hit with a pistol round than a rifle round.
and some AR-15s are pistols.
That's true. Some are, and some are chambered in pistol rounds. Some are calibers. Some are chambered in rifle calibers. It's sort of interchangeable. You can even get handguns, traditional handguns, that are chambered in rifle calibers, such as the Tokarev.
So another Aaron Bredden, $80. Thank you very much for that. Enforcing existing laws and gun safety training is the way to go. Nice to hear civilized discussion on real solutions. Now, I want to give that definition. The most consistent one I've been able to find is an assault rifle is a selective fire rifle that uses an intermediate cartridge and has detachable magazine. This is the U.S. Army definition. And this was posted right after somebody criticized my ignorance for thinking there was such a thing as an assault rifle because they said they were only imaginary. This is somebody calling me ignorant. And then a number of other people chimed in and said, no, an assault rifle has to be fully auto. And then other people arguing, these are all people who are calling me ignorant. They're arguing amongst themselves as to whether an assault rifle is fully auto or not.
It's the one thing that all, both the left, the right, anti-gun, gun, pro-gun people can agree on is that nobody can agree on what an assault weapon is.
So somebody told me today that the reason that the definition of assault rifle changes is so that Democrat commies can turn law-abiding citizens into criminals.
Because, Marx was very anti-gun. Everyone knows that. Famously said, what was it? Under no pretense shall the people be allowed to have guns. It was definitely that.
Yes, words to that effect. Actually, no, just to clarify for everybody in the chat, Karl Marx was a very strong proponent of keeping guns to defend yourself against your own government.
Literally the exact opposite of what I just said.
The Biden
Anton
Harris-
Gomez, good to hear from you. 100 Mexican pesos. What are you guys' opinion on how people have kids in shooting ranges saying that it's better to teach them young so they have respect for the gun and how to be safe with it? I'm all for teaching kids how to know and respect the gun. I tell you what my dad did to me. My evil stepfather bought me a .22 caliber rifle when I was 12. And sent me off to go visit my biological father for the summer with that .22. And my dad set up a bunch of cans because he lived in a trailer out in the middle of the desert because, we're white trash. And so he sets up this pyramid of cans and he wants to have me shoot out all these cans with my .22. And for one of those rare moments, he pats me on the back, proud of his son. And then, why don't you shoot them with my gun? And hands me what I thought at the time was a very similar looking, small, lightweight gun. It was a .410 shotgun, and when I squeezed the trigger the one time, I woke up on the ground. I was not prepared for that difference. And all the cans were gone, by the way. I blew them all out in one shot.
A friend of mine is Sandring. He sent you two super chats so far, and he wants a response. I see him in there. I see you, Sandring.
Sendering Pearson, so many things I want to say. You skipped my other super chat, you meanie. And Joe LaFaro, $10. Thank you for that. I never feared being shot to death when I was in school in the 70s and 80s. What things have changed to create our present situation? Well, I think we should discuss that because I'm not going to pretend to know.
I have a lot of answers on that question. There are a lot of answers to that question. So in doing a bit of research for this ahead of time, I kept finding a lot of things come back to the 90s. we started having really like this mass shooting problem really kind of kicked off in the 90s. Not only was that the case, but we also start having Fox News came around in the 90s. We started having a culture where fear and paranoia was constantly pushed on us all the time. The war on drugs, tough on crime politics. The Democrats adopted the tough on crime stance alongside the Republicans in the 90s. We started having more and more propaganda, which was has been prevalent in American history throughout, but had a big boom in the 80s and the 90s. And so on and so forth. But then also we've got social media. We've got, extremist groups online, creating these echo chambers that seek to, pick out people who are in a bad place mentally. They feel isolated, emasculated, what have you, and then constantly feed them toxic bullshit in a never-ending loop, gets them deeper and deeper down a hole, gets them to isolate themselves farther and farther from any other perspectives or other people in general, and keep teaching them violence and hate. When you take a whole generation of people and start disconnecting them from each other and then just constantly bombarding them with fascist eugenics and replacement theory bullshit, what do you expect them to do but eventually go nuts and start killing people?
Yeah, I blame a lot of that on our media that wants to instill fear, that wants to keep everybody paranoid about being replaced, or to actually instill racial, racist ideology. Where I have people in my own family that watch Fox News and come away thinking that blacks commit all the crimes, and I said that's not even statistically possible.
All right, so I got a few things. I got a few things I want to add to that as well.
Okay.
Ultimately, because this is not, so many people out there want a black and white answer to everything. And so many people out there try to look at the world that way, not understanding, of course, the world is nothing but shades of gray, right?
The spectrum of color.
That's right. The thing is that eventually it does blend into all these different colors. It's all shades of gray. And so along with building this wall of fear, ultimately, you also have just the culture that has glorified the violence as well. And I'm going to say something that's going to not be very popular. And as much as I love playing my video games and my Call of Duty, the reality of it is I want you to take a look at the guns. What happens when you prestige weapons? You make them prettier. You make them cooler looking. And the reality is when you take a look at some of the drug lords' weapons that have been confiscated, gold plated, diamond encrusted, and we start, I've even seen purse guns that were pink. It's become a status thing as well as everything else. It's become, as I heard it put the other day, tactical, as opposed to something that should be respected, something that is just nothing more than a tool. And this feeds to that as well, because not only now am I, potentially full of fear and full of hate, but I'm going to look cool and stylish while doing it. It really kind of comes down to that as well. It's a layered issue that we're looking at. And so we really need layered effects to it, to address it, to try and change this culture that this is okay on any level.
All the branches of government we own. We've got all the branches of government locked up right now. Why can't we get anything passed? And the proposal now, I only agree with about 30% of it. The rest is either like Kurgan was saying, it's aesthetics, dumbly defining assault weapons, which does nothing. And then the magazine capacity, I've already talked about that. If you have a 3D printer, that's a box with a spring. It's going to be hard to regulate that. The only good thing in the Biden-Harris plan right now is universal background checks, which I'm all for. And I like Arn's idea of bumping up the age limit. But why aren't we doing something about it?
If we're talking about laws that I think would be a good idea, I think we should repeal Stand Your Ground. I think that'll help.
Tell me more.
Are you familiar with Stand Your Ground?
I don't think everybody in the chat is.
Okay. So Stand Your Ground, not every state has it, but stand your ground laws state that as long as you are in a place that you have a legal right to be and have a fear for your life, you are able to defend yourself with lethal force. So that would mean if you are in a Walmart and a guy pulls out a knife and you say you are afraid for your life, you can just shoot him. So some people think that makes you more safe because in a situation where you need to defend yourself or others, you have the ability to do so. Unfortunately, it also means that paranoid people who don't have a grasp on reality can just start popping off rounds at any perceived threat. So, there was a case, John Oliver had a good segment on Stand Your Ground. There was a man, his name was, hang on, I got him in my notes somewhere. It doesn't matter. There was a man who saw his neighbor's house being robbed, called the cops, argued with the cops that he needed to shoot the people, even though they told him like 12 or 14 different times to just stay in his own house and not bother with the situation. Decided no, he had to do something about it. So he went out and shot the robbers that were robbing the neighbor's house in the back, running away. Didn't get in trouble for this, and in fact was hailed as a hero. So
that is that the Trayvon Martin thing where you decide that this person wearing a hoodie is a threat, so you hunt them down?
Yeah, exactly. It is a law that defends that kind of thing. It's not saying that's legal, but it does make it way easier for that situation to have the shooter actually get away with that. And it sort of encourages an element of our toxic culture that says that, like, you have a gun, you are the police, and you need to go around and dish out justice wherever you can find it.
Right, because the law is not actually written that you can hunt them down, but it is that you don't have to back down. So
exactly.
if you're
Otherwise, you have a duty to retreat.
Right.
I have to apologize for all these super chats coming in. Cooper Gates, $10, says, as Ulfürst just mentioned, how much does harm reduction to handle drug abuse as opposed to the war on drugs compare to proper training and enforcement of gun restrictions? I know I must have read that question wrong. And then Stephen for $10 says, is there a problem with prohibiting sales of semi-automatic guns for a few years, maybe 25? No solution is complete, but positive change drives numbers down. Yes, you can't. There might be a strategic advantage in that, but you have to remember that you're telling a business that they can't operate
for 25 years.
For a quarter of a century, and which is that goes against an awful lot of what America stands for. And so now Caden Pat, $9.99, says, why is the well-regulated militia part of the Second Amendment ignored? And that's a good point. We should bring it up. The reason we have the Second Amendment was because having a well-regulated militia, because that is a requirement in the early colonies when we just became a country and we didn't yet have a full standing army. The army was made of militias, which a definition of a militia is, the collective people come forth with their guns. And so that's why people had to have guns, so that the government could call upon them to defend the government. Now, other people have interpreted it as you need to defend yourself from the government, but that's not the way the First Amendment is, that's not the way the Second Amendment is written. There's
more than either of those too. The United States did not always have a dedicated police force. In fact, modern policing is exactly that. It's modern. Throughout most of history, the military doubled as police, and we used to just have sheriffs for a very long time throughout the United States. And they would be able to call upon members of the public and create posses as part of the militia for the purpose of dealing with threats to the public. So, before SWAT or before cops in general, you'd have a sheriff, and that person could deputize people at need to create an armed population to deal with a threat that requires arms, rather than just having armed thugs walking around shooting black people because they have a culture of doing that.
Yeah. So Radio Chaos, I got another one, $5 here in Canada. If you're a licensed gun owner, your record is checked every day. If you start to become known to police, you lose your license. Arizona, where Kurgan lives and where Ulfürst was born and where I lived for a long time, had this open weapons law, and we knew somebody that went to prison for a year, fortunately for a non-violent crime. But when you go to prison, when you have domestic violence issues, you lose your guns. And he had to go before a judge sometime after he came out of prison in order to get his guns back, in order to get
his rights reinstated. Yes.
Yes.
In fact, we've known two people who have had to do that.
Seeing in the chat, people are commenting on my sheriff thing. Some people are saying sheriffs came from the people that caught runaway slaves. That's not true. Sheriffs existed before that, but modern police are from that are from the Fugitive Slave Act. So, like
Kevin Harris,
both things combined into modern policing.
Kevin Harris for $20 says, I think assault weapons bans are pointless. You get an illegal assault rifle and legal not assault rifle with little differences between them. As long as guns are able to fire bullets, other restrictions are irrelevant. And on the distinction of what is or is not an assault rifle, since most people refer to the AR-15 with that intent, when they're talking about assault rifle, correct definition or not, when they're talking about assault rifle, they mean AR, which they think they mean. I know that it doesn't mean assault rifle, but they think that it means assault rifle. So that's what everyone is talking about. It occurs to me that the AR-15 is, as others had mentioned before, it is based on a military weapon, but it's not necessarily full auto. And it is there probably is a reason why the AR-15 is the most popular rifle, when it is a rifle, in the United States. And my thought on that is that the reason that the AR-15 is the most popular rifle is probably going to be comparable reasons to why the Ford F-150 is the most popular vehicle, because it's the most versatile, it's the most capable for everyday blue-collar use.
No.
It's also affordable. It's also very affordable. You can get an AR-15
it's the cheapest. That's why the military contract has the M4, which is the military version of it, because it's the lowest bidder. There are so many way better military rifles, but I mean, your standard issue is going to be an M4.
At best, the AR-15 is a low to moderate powered weapon, partially so that you can fit more rounds into the magazine. If you can fit more rounds, you can shoot more bad guys, except that they're not particularly lethal in that regard. Don't get me wrong. Every firearm is lethal, but in comparison to, like, say, an M1, doesn't hold a candle.
Like chat, the M4 is not a civilian weapon. There is no civilian M4. It's the AR-15. That is the civilian version of the M4. And the N16A2 and the N16A4, all of the military, they're not fully auto. They haven't been fully auto since Vietnam era. They're 3-round burst, and no one uses those anyway. No Marine I know in combat zone has ever used a 3-round burst.
Yeah, I apologize for
every time.
It's the worst between 3-round burst is the worst between semi-automatic and like fully automatic. It's the worst of both worlds.
To be quite honest, I always found that one pull the trigger, one bullet was more than enough, and helped keep on target a lot easier anyway.
Yeah, it goes back to paintball. That's the reason I like the Calico M950, when you've got 99 9mm rounds, and it's just like I can squeeze my trigger really fast. I can kill all the zombies in my immediate area. So Citizen Gold for NZ $10. I don't remember what NZ is. I want to say that was Norwegian, but I can't remember. Could any of these groups be fairly described as well regulated? Would enforcing that be an improvement? I don't know how we're going to address that question.
Yeah, since then, the precedent has broadened the Second Amendment. At the time of its writing, it was a very narrow definition to include just militia members. But the most recent precedent is 2010, McDonald versus Chicago. Chicago tried to ban all pistols. Semi-automatic pistols. 2010, and that was overturned. They ruled for the plaintiff. It's a much more broad definition, the Second Amendment now, and includes personal ownership of handguns.
Very good. So I don't know how to pronounce this one. PR1 Mall, $10. I want to see the same energy from the GOP as they have for abortion Let me applaud that. Right. I want to
Yeah.
see it. I want to see a $10,000 bounty law for anyone associated with enabling, funding, or facilitating a mass shooter. Yeah, let's call out the hypocrisy there. Right. Well, suddenly this is my right for whatever bodily autonomy. That's not my right for whatever reason, because they got double standards on everything. Imperator Zor, Canadian $10, says humans don't think at a societal level. Most crime comes from social issues / failures, e.g., poverty, mental health, etc. But that's abstract. Good man shoot bad man is wrong, but it's an individual thing. And then another one. Indiator Jr., as a left-leaning Second Amendment absolutist, I am really loving the nuanced conversation. Thanks, guys. I love your work. Thank you very much for that. Nicholas Lamar Souter for $10. People with mental health issues can always afford health care. I'm sorry, I misread that. Can't always afford health care. Yeah, if it's a mental health issue, can I assume people are for free health care, meds, and health screening? Well, I am, because I'm a leftist, and that means that I believe that I value human rights over corporate profits. So yeah, I think that should be available to people.
On the topic of abortion there, it's almost again as if banning something doesn't actually stop it from happening.
Yeah, exactly, right?
And it's something that's always astounded me about conservatives. You say, I'd like to smoke weed. They say, ban it. If we ban it, it won't happen anymore. Oh, I'd like to get an abortion. Ban it. If we ban it, it won't happen anymore. Can you stop these mass shootings? Can you ban these guns? No, banning doesn't work.
Yeah, because if as my dad put it when I was a little kid, he said if they outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns. Okay, well that works for guns, but that doesn't apparently work for abortions or drugs somehow.
Well, that's okay. For each of those people out there who say ban it, especially those on the religious right, amongst this group of people right here, I'm sure they'll agree. One of the first stories in the Bible is how people don't listen.
Oh, there was a clip just yesterday. Aaron, if you haven't seen it, I'm going to send it to you. He's a preacher in a news interview, and they asked him, what do you think of the Uvalde thing? And he said, the gun problem. He said, there is no gun problem. There's a demon problem. I was like, oh, man, when 41% of your country still believes in demons and angels and nonsense and thinks that's the cause of all the violence, come on.
That's what the Arizona Senate. That's exactly what the Arizona Senate said. They blamed atheism. They said that mass shootings were caused by teaching evolution versus over creationism.
Yes. And I watched that whole video that you put out there, and it was just. Are there any words, really?
Have you considered running, since you live in Phoenix? Have you considered running for the Senate in your state, Kurgan?
Every now and then it crosses my mind, especially with the cycle coming up, and I'm starting to see all the red posters up. So, oh
gosh,
yeah.
So if everybody had, if you had a car, if everybody gets to get a car, and it all costs the same amount, you just get to pick what kind of car you want, and all costs were equal. There would be very few people that got Lamborghinis. Because there will be a whole lot of people that got pickup trucks and stuff, because you need something that carries your stuff. You need something that will accommodate. And likewise, if everybody got a personal firearm to protect themselves, that there'd be some people that would choose a pistol, but then there's other people that would have more demand that need to go hunting, and maybe they're considering that maybe they would have to defend themselves against their own government, whatever, for whatever reason, whatever the justification is, they're going to want more versatility. And if they're wanting more versatility, they're probably going. I might go with a Calico M950 because I think that was pretty cool. But I mean, most other people would probably, I think, select an AR-15 because it's efficient, it's lightweight, it's not a high-powered round. And so this is why most people would take that, because it can do whatever you needed your gun to do, whether you have to shoot varmints on your farm, or whether you need to defend yourself against criminals, or whether you need to defend yourself against some imagined invasion, whatever the thing is. And I'm not asking people to justify that. But if you were to ban the AR-15, as so many people are trying to do, then the thing that would replace it, because it's not like there's only one category. You take the AR-15 away, that then suddenly we're not going to have any other comparable rifles. They would be much worse. They would be things that fire Saturn V rockets out of the end, not these tiny little bullets that the AR fires.
I mean, if you were to ban the AR-15, so one of the reasons that the AR-15 is used frequently, it's not the most commonly used, but it is used frequently, is because it is common. So if we were to look at just what's common, you'd see even more handgun shootings, which are more common than AR shootings, but you would also then see more Ruger Mini 14s. You'd see, which are already pretty common. You'd see more shotgun shootings. You'd see more just whatever people had around, which there are lots of options for that. There's a shit ton of different guns out there, and lots of people have lots of different stuff. So AKs, you'd start getting more variety, I guess, but that still, you wouldn't solve a problem that way.
And really, in a lot of respects, part of the reason why the AR-15 is one of the most popular rifles in America ultimately comes back to it is what the military uses. And a lot of these guys, they want to go out, they want to buy a gun, they want to be like the guy in the military.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so the Beretta is only still, I think, in business because of that.
The M9 is the service pistol. I don't know why Berettas aren't so super popular.
I've known several people who've had Berettas, and every single one were like, "Oh, well, it's what the military uses. That's why they bought it. It's a piece of shit pistol." But
the thing
is, kind of like the Humvee.
Yeah, piece of shit.
The thing is, though, is that this is something that does need to definitely get addressed, because the reality is the military is currently looking at, I believe they have approved a new primary weapon for the armed forces that is far more powerful than the
M4.
The M4, because it's designed to defeat body armor. And at that point, it's like one of the things with Uvalde is the officers didn't go in. They were waiting on gear, or they were waiting on a key, whatever their reason. And most people agree that it was the wrong choice by far. But the gear, again, it comes down to kid had an AR-15. There's some possibility. In fact, 3 officers were shot by him and checked out of the hospital, thinking that their tac vest might have helped out. And if we move to a heavier weapon that's designed to defeat that, it's going to get a lot worse. This is something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed now, because the conversation is going to change drastically soon, because the very weapon is already available to the public. You can pre-order one.
A civilian single-shot semi-automatic version, then.
Yeah.
But
semi-automatic is fast enough.
Right. That's why everyone's complaining about the AR-15. It's like I said at the top of the show, it is the exact same rate of fire as any semi-automatic pistol. It shoots just as fast.
Plenty of hunting rifles. Plenty of semi-automatic hunting rifles have the same cycle rate. So the reality is, it doesn't matter whether it's a handgun, whether it's a rifle. We are demonizing this particular weapon. The media, the messaging is demonizing this particular weapon. And again, it comes back to, it is the most popular rifle in America. It's the one that gets used most often when it is used, because Ulfürst is right. Handguns are used more often. Virginia was nothing but handguns. So it's demonizing something that we shouldn't be demonizing.
I really like Aaron's idea. I never considered it before, up in the age limit, because how many of these shooters were under 21?
Yep.
A lot. But the thing on that is, most of these younger shooters were using somebody else's gun. So a very important thing is you have to, I'm not sure if there's any way to enforce any sort of legislation to make
Switzerland does it. They have some very strict laws on storage.
Maybe something like that can work, but and making it harder for non-eligible people to access guns that are someone else's, That's obvious. That's so obviously a good idea.
And it's part of the reason why you add criminal liability to anybody who has made it possible. It would tend to make people be a little more responsible about how they're storing their firearms.
Yeah. And the psychological thing. Right now, if you've ever been institutionalized for a mental health issue, you don't get to own a weapon. But should we up that more? And then it gets sticky. There becomes gray areas. It becomes open to,
Well, here's another one. Domestic abuse. If you are a domestic abuser, you should not be allowed to have a gun.
That is,
as it stands right now, you can, though, unless it's a felony abuse, then you cannot.
Right. Now, and that's because the cops have, like, what was it, like 41% of cops are domestic abusers.
Exactly, which is part of the reason why
you can't just ban 41% of your police force from having guns.
It's part of the reason why there are loopholes in the DV laws, according for that. And we need to close those loopholes. We need to make it harder for that, because, and to be quite honest, if you're a domestic abuser, domestic violence, you commit this thing, you probably shouldn't be a police officer anyway.
And we haven't even talked about private sales either. Private sale, no background checks. Well, if we eliminated private sale, a lot of European countries don't allow private sale.
Andre the Alien for $5 says, whatever happened to just having a shotgun or rifle for hunting? You don't need anything more. Thank you, Bill Gates, for telling me we don't need any more than 64 meg of RAM. Yeah, you kind of do need something more if you're talking about home defense. I mean,
hang on. Beyond that, the Ruger Mini 14 and the AR-15 are, in terms of function, basically the same gun. The Ruger Mini 14 is the most popular hunting rifle in America. They're basically the same gun. AR-15s are used all the time for hunting, all the time.
So when people used to argue. People argued that the Second Amendment was written in the 1700s when it took a minute to do your black powder reload. But the thing is that if you are interested in home defense, then at minimum, you're going to be defending yourself against somebody who has 10 rounds of 9mm that are coming out of a very rapid fire pistol. Your shotgun ain't going to cut it. And that's if there's only one of them. So.
Now, I would like to point out here the vast majority,
more than one.
The vast majority of home invasions do not happen middle of the night and you're there with your gun. They mostly happen while you're at work, and they do that so that they don't encounter a home owner with a gun, because it makes sense to do that. But, just pointing that out. On that topic, I went ahead and looked into it on how often guns are used in the United States for self-defense purposes versus criminal purposes, and that is inconclusive to find, which is not terribly surprising, because most of the time when somebody uses a gun in self-defense, they don't actually shoot anyone, let alone kill that person, and most of the time they don't report it. So very hard to actually get those numbers. Some people say that it's a Harvard study claimed that it was something like 36 times as often for criminal use, but they also put a lot of weird qualifiers on it, and others say that it's 80,000 cases of defensive use of a handgun or other firearm every year in America. It's hard to actually get numbers on, but it generally seems to be that people are using firearms for self-defense definitely more often than for mass shootings. But and that's just self-defense. That's not talking about hunting or anything else. I've had to use a handgun for self-defense. I've never had to shoot anybody. And that's part of it. Most of the time, you don't actually have to shoot anybody.
And it comes back down to training, and really mandatory training should be part of it. The whole concept of a good guy with a gun rescuing everybody, while it does happen every once in a while, that person without proper training who's just carrying around a gun, who thinks that they're going to save the day if a mass shooter shows up or somebody tries to rob them, is more likely to harm themselves than somebody else or have that gun taken away.
There are two instances I want to bring up based on what Kurgan just said. One, there was a Black Lives Matter rally here in Dallas once upon a time, and because it was black people gathering together, then all of these people with assault rifles had to show up in a show of force to intimidate them somehow. I don't know why that was necessary. But then it turned out that there was a sniper in one of the elevated positions in a hotel that fired down on the whole thing. And so all of these good guys with guns had to run for cover. Nobody could save the day. And knowing this, it became especially ridiculous when I hear Sean Hannity say that if he was there and if he had his Glock or whatever the hell it is that he carries, if when he was in Las Vegas and you had that guy with all those machine guns with all those giant capacity magazines, and he's in an undercover position, like, you know, a block away or whatever, using a high powered scope, and he's picking out people in a crowd, Sean Hannity believes that he could have saved the day with his 9mm. I guess he's just going to crack off that one shot that in which one of the 2,000 windows that you can see.
He's got magic bullets.
The Vegas shooter, were those? I don't think those were fully auto. Were they? He was using a bump stock.
Bump stocks.
Yeah,
bump stocks. Yeah.
Which also that'd be hard as hell to regulate. But if you know what you're doing with the bump stocks, you can turn anything into fully auto.
I'd like to point that out. Donald Trump banned bump stocks.
What else did he ban?
Let's see. I've got.
You were telling me that you had guns that were no longer legal because of Trump.
Yeah. So Donald Trump personally didn't make that many changes to gun laws, though he did.
He wanted to.
Before running for president, he was quoted making many anti-gun statements. And then under his presidency, the ATF made several more restrictive rulings, effectively making a number of previously perfectly legal weapon configurations now felonies, suddenly creating thousands of felons overnight. And the ATF does not fuck around. So, like, you can have an AR-15 pistol-length carbine, and at one time you can have a pistol brace on it and a forward grip. And that's perfectly fine. And then they say, oh, forward grip, actually, now that's a felony. Congratulations. You're a felon now.
So somebody told me
you can also have an AR-15 pistol-length carbine, but if you put it to your shoulder, now it's a short-barreled rifle. Now it's a felony. So legal, illegal.
Yeah, so somebody told me today that all of that was being caused by Democrats who want to turn law-abiding citizens into criminals. But you're saying it's actually the Republicans who are doing that. What a shock.
Yeah, Obama passed. Obama didn't actually pass, if I'm remembering correctly, any new gun laws. He did have 23 executive orders, but they amounted to less than Donald Trump passed for gun control. So Trump actually passed more gun control than Obama did. But
Obama took all our guns away. I know, because everybody told me every day that he was going to take all our guns away. He had 8 years to do it. You know, so Imperator Zor for $10 Canadian says fixating over makes and model of gun is not productive. M16, AR-15, AK-47, Charleville Autofusel from Timeline, where Napoleon won, all shoot intermediate bullets, semi-auto / auto at 3-500 meter range.
So here's something about that. It's something that I assume anyone in your audience is not a mass shooter. So
let me tell you, I certainly hope so.
I did plenty of research into this. I'm probably on some watch lists now in preparation for this conversation today. And something I suspected to be
You've
true
been on watch
beforehand.
list for a while, son.
That's true. So something I suspected for a long time to be true, I have now had confirmed by the numbers. Guns are not the most effective way to kill a lot of people really quickly. A lot of liberals make this argument that the AR-15 was designed to kill as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And no, it wasn't. We didn't level Hiroshima and Nagasaki with AR-15s. That's just not what you do. You want to kill a lot of people real fast, you use a bomb.
I don't even want to. I don't want the conversation to go that way.
Yeah.
Well, it's a genuine thing to concern ourselves about.
Yeah,
it's a genuine thing to concern ourselves about because people are talking about banning guns. Well, I looked into the numbers for Australia and the UK and America after the assault weapons ban, and in all cases, mortality went up. In all three countries, mortality went up. The more gun control was put into place, the less people used guns, the more people used fire and bombs, which killed more people and don't require that you be there at the time. Most mass shooters kill themselves or get killed by police. They then can't commit any more crimes.
They go into it knowing that that's going to be the outcome.
And interestingly enough, to tie into that just a little bit, when the assault weapons ban went into effect in the United States, it did not decrease the amount, the number of AR-15s being sold. In fact, it increased. The number increased. All they did was took the flash suppression off. They took they put a standard stock on it, so it wasn't collapsible. The bayonet lug came off. Otherwise, it is the exact same rifle. All the inner workings
and the broomstick grip.
Exactly, and the broomstick grip. And the thing is that sales and production just kept increasing, and yet the gun violence from them dropped off. But as you pointed out, other forms of committing murder just kind of took its place.
Yeah, I actually have the statistics. I had to go through the statistics, but I've got them here. So I already listed the ones for Australia, right? I did that on recording. Yeah. Okay. So in the UK, in the 25 years before the UK firearms ban of 1997, 144, some of these were already killed with explosives, but I couldn't find out the exact number in the attacks, if they were killed with bullets or explosives. But in the 25 years since then, it was 19 that were killed with guns. So 144 before, 19 after. Mass killing deaths in the UK prior to the firearms ban in total, 396. And then mass killing deaths in the UK since in total, 116. So actually, Britain had less. But one of them was way more than any of the other ones, and it was from, if I remember, it was a plane. Somebody blew up a plane and it fell on a town and like took out like half this town. Britain has had 5 fatal mass shootings in the style of American mass shootings in total. 3 were before their bans and 2 were after.
2 were after?
2 were after. Mass shooting deaths in the 28 years before the assault weapons ban in America, which is 3 years after the first AR-15s became available for civilian purchase in the U.S., and 63 years after the first production semi-automatic rifle was sold, was 192. Mass shooting deaths in the 28 years since was 620. So we've had way more mass shooting deaths after the assault weapons ban than before. Mass killing deaths in the 28 years before the assault weapons ban was 653, and mass killing deaths in the 28 years since was 1,046, plus the 3,230 just from 9/11 itself. But not counting that, it's still 1,046 mass killing deaths in general. So mass killing deaths have gone up more than mass shooting deaths have, even in the United States, where obviously we have the most unrestricted access to firearms compared to other countries. But mass killing deaths on the total have been going up in general, and mass shooting deaths in America, definitely a lot more than Australia, have been going up. But that goes back to the cultural problem. It's not necessarily that there aren't guns in these places. It's just we have this tendency of shooting each other.
Yeah, well, interestingly, what I see is that it is the stronger catalyst. Rather than banning AR-15s, as we should ban Fox News.
Yeah.
So, Matt Holtz, so for $10, says reallocate the military budget, hire homeless veterans for gun safety training from the federal level, passing a $0 cost because Second Amendment gun safety course mandatory, just like driving. And then Rob Lifton for $19.99 says, I knew a gun expert, and it puts expert, who once told me that Reagan should have had a gun he would have taken Hinckley out himself. I knew better than to argue with him, which is funny. Hinckley is right now being released, but with full freedom after having shot Reagan. And Reagan is relevant to this discussion because, Reagan banned assault rifles when he was governor of California in 1967. He banned assault rifles when he saw that black people had them.
Yeah.
Not kidding.
Yeah, it was the Black Panthers wanted to protect themselves from getting constantly murdered by police. So got to take those guns away. Don't want those people that happen to be a few shades darker than me having them.
Yeah, so Dave Chappelle recently tweeted that if you want to control guns effectively, just have every black man in the country register a firearm, and then we will have gun control.
Yeah, that would do it.
Catch Bay for 20 euros says, I don't know where the myth comes from that you can't do private sales in Europe. Here, Finland, you can do that, and mail order guns and ammo. Almost all of the killing is made with knives through some 10% own guns. Well, it's nice that you go back to the old traditional means of killing. Stick the knife in me. The old traditions are the best.
There's another thing. One of the things, it's been kind of, the chat's kind of alluded to this, but and we've kind of touched on it. The AR-15 is not necessarily a better mass shooting gun than any other gun. It's just that it gets a lot of coverage, and we've seen that these things come in trends. We started having Columbine, and then suddenly we have an explosion of school shootings. Like we cover this, we glorify it by announcing the agendas of the people who commit these shootings, putting their names and their faces on television for weeks at a time. We make them into celebrities, dark celebrities maybe, but they're into that. So we're not helping that. But then also, it's not even just guns that have this. During the BLM protests, it's not like no one had ever run over a crowd before with their car. But during the BLM protests, it was happening all the time. So one person did it, and suddenly it became the trendy thing to do. And then Florida legalized it. Because that's just the thing you do.
Florida legalized running over protesters with your car.
Yes. I don't remember the exact phrasing of it, but effectively they just, if there's protesters and you're afraid of the protesters, you're fearing for your life, you can hit them with your car.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're fearing for your life, then maybe I can see it. But
well, then it goes back to that fucking stand your ground shit where, oh no, I saw a black man, scary, vroom. So,
yeah, somebody pointed out that when that I'm talking to like my son and my best friend from 30, 40 years ago, and of course Jim. And that we don't have any, that we're all just white guys. And I'm sorry that the dice roll just happened to be that way today. It didn't even occur to me. That happens sometimes. And I'm sorry that it has that appearance. But I would like to. What's that?
Diversity comes in many forms.
Yeah.
I'd also like to point out, since the way that these things disproportionately affect minorities came up, I'd like to point out that there's a few laws that people have recommended before that sound very reasonable on paper, but I have some concerns about them. So one of them is registration and licensing, making somebody have to get a license to have a gun. It sounds great on paper, but then I remember that if you want to get a class 3 license where I live, the sheriff has said they're not gonna do that. They just aren't going to give any more of them out. And that reminds me that you need to go through local police. And then I think about how I, in a hypothetical situation, or indeed most mass shooters, since most mass shooters look an awful lot like me, would be very easy, to actually get those licenses, because cops judges sign off on most warrants for SWAT raids in under 30 seconds. You know, so like cops, they're gonna go, oh, white guy wants a gun, yeah, sure, I'll give him a gun, but DeMarcus maybe not gonna get that approval.
Which is interesting. Which is interesting because the vast majority of the people who have committed this act typically are white, tend to lean towards the right or racist ideologies.
Yeah, but the media will never say that, will they? They'll never use the word terrorist if you're white and Christian.
Oh, of course not. A thing on that too. I found FBI statistics that listed, I think it was 116 foiled far right terror attacks, or not foiled, 116 far right terror attacks compared to 19 far left ones in total.
Okay.
So,
and I apologize, Kurgan. I asked you on here because I want to tell everybody in the audience too. I mean, Kurgan has been my buddy for decades, and he's a motorcycle mechanic and he's a tattooist. But the man knows more than most people of those vocations would. And I've always been impressed with his intellect and his pool of knowledge. And so I told him, you need to get a microphone. You need to be doing this. And so I invited him. This is his premiere show. This is his introduction. And we have spoken over him every time he started to open his mouth. I sincerely apologize, Kurgan. Please prepare your statement. Take it.
Oh, no. I've actually been able to say everything that I've wanted to say along the way. Just the fact that I'm able to contribute to this conversation at all is a good thing. So,
okay.
Starting your own channel, that's going to be great. The more the merrier.
Yeah, we have been almost an hour and a half at this, and I'm kind of impressed. When I did the Quran lessons for like a number of years, we would average 150, maybe up to 200 viewers. And when we did the Bible lessons, the first episode of the Bible lessons, we got up to something like 650, and we've been 750 viewers almost consistently until about this moment when the viewership has finally started to drop off a little bit. So I'm going to let everybody make, if you've had prepared statements, if you know statistics or any other useful information that you did the research and you want to present it, please take that opportunity now, and we'll go ahead and close this up.
I actually have a lot still. So for one, the sheer volume of guns in the United States makes any kind of ban basically impossible. There's 393 million guns in the United States. That's 46% of the world's total civilian-owned firearms. And for reference, there's only 276 million cars in the United States. So, and there's more guns than people. There's more guns than cars. It's
our
not
guns
bad.
have guns.
And then also, just again, reminder, the police are fucking incompetent in their job. If you want to start having them go around rounding up guns from people, that's just a terrible idea on the face of it. And
yeah,
quite frankly,
I
also,
see where that's going.
Quite frankly, also, I don't trust the police to protect me. The Uvalde shooting is a great example of this.
Isn't
Columbine
it?
Is a great example of this. You can't trust the cops to protect you. They have no legal requirement. They have no legal obligation to protect you. Why would you depend on them? I'm not going to. That's why I need a gun in terms of self-defense. But also, I'm more concerned that the cops themselves are going to shoot me than a home intruder breaking in the middle of the night, because SWAT raids happen all the time, and like 10% of them are to the wrong address. And they no knock, they just blow up your door, come in and start shooting. We live in a country where that's just a thing that can happen. And Breonna Taylor didn't have a gun. She didn't fight back. She didn't resist arrest. She laid in bed and got riddled with 32 shots. So
yeah, well, she was
not like you can say, well,
she met the description
and surrender. Like, no, they'll just shoot you anyway.
Yeah, while you're asleep.
Yeah. So,
and then wasn't her kid also shot at the same time?
I don't remember specifically, but between 2010 and 2016, at least 81 civilians were killed wrongfully by SWAT raids.
Dan Gonzalez, $10, says, so the too long didn't read is the real problem is toxic mix of awful mental and physical health care, inflamed political tensions, and nauseatingly bad education. Color me shocked in sarcasm. No, I completely agree with that. Yeah, it's all the things that leftists want to fix is the problem. Yeah. So Neil Wojahan, $20 says, are you familiar with the correlation between psychotropics given to children and how nearly every school shooter has been on pharmaceuticals and suffered neglected treatment? Universal mental health care could prevent a lot of them. I didn't know anything about that. It seems reasonable to believe such a thing. I got a notice in the comments that was complaining, I think about you, Ulfürst, that they were upset that a moment ago you were supporting guns and now you're not. And I remember what you said. You never not supported the Second Amendment, so I don't know where the hell you actually said that we have so many guns that banning them would be impossible. I don't know how people got the wrong message out of that.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
but I think there's a number of good reasons to have guns. I think that under no circumstances should the people be disarmed. I am definitely pro-gun. I do think that there are some things that we could probably do to, curb the tendencies that we have. I think most of the problems that we have with these mass shootings is a social issue. I think a lot of it is media, both mainstream media like Fox News, sadly, and also
not just them, but a bunch of others like them.
But also things like 4chan and other areas of the internet. We can't deny that the rise of fascism and white nationalism is having a very strong and negative impact on our country. It's also true that a lot of people are being pushed towards these ideologies because we live in late stage capitalism and everyone is constantly stressed and barely able to provide for themselves. So, we've got a whole bunch of people who are suffering and find some kind of outlet for that suffering. And sometimes it's bigotry and hate and stupid shit like that. So we end up there. I did want to also talk about some other things that I think would be a good idea to, as far as like laws. I think waiting periods would be good. I mean, yes. I like the convenience of I go to the gun store and I come home with my gun that day because, well, I don't want to sit there for 10 days going, I want to take it to the range already. But
I'm angry now.
But also, I do think that if we do impose waiting periods, that we should also have some way that you can expedite it. If you can prove that you are under genuine threat, if you've been getting death threats or have just left an abusive spouse or something like that, if you can be like, hey, I would like a gun and I would like it before I have been beaten to death, please.
Especially when the police won't do anything until after something has happened anyway.
Exactly. The cops aren't there to protect you. They're there to write a report about how you died. Don't
forget they have a policy of not reporting missing persons until the trail is too cold to chase them.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's something I said already. Repeal the stand your ground laws. That said, I do have there. I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to spend too much time on it, but duty to retreat does have some situations where it can be problematic too.
Let me ask a quick question.
I'm a little worried about.
If we elect Beto to be our new governor, is he going to take away our AR-15s?
I don't genuinely think that he will, simply because it would be so fucking hard to do. But also, if he did, it would be monumentally stupid.
To be honest, the political landscape in Texas wouldn't allow him to even get close enough.
And if
as the much worst as you would
case
like
scenario is if he succeeded, if the worst case scenario is if he succeeded, because then we go back to that. How are you going to get them?
Yeah.
You think Texans are just going to go hand over their AR-15s? Hell no.
Exactly.
Most people after the ban on bump stocks didn't hand over their bump stocks. Hell, most of them didn't change anything at all. Some of them, maybe went and hid their bump stock, made sure to not post pictures of it online. But
yeah, I want people to know that it's
be a better criminal.
It's possible that multiple people in this chat removed a collection of rifles from the camera view. It's possible that happened.
Just to stay
Before this
monetized.
And then so you end up in this situation where either it's unenforceable or you make the terrible mistake of trying to enforce it. And then you end up with SWAT raids with little or no provocation on. And again, like, let's not pretend it's mostly white conservative leaning people that are doing these shootings, but we know cops aren't like that. They'd still be busting in mostly black people's doors to take their guns and just shooting them more. So we would just be giving more excuses for cops to shoot people, predominantly black people, without actually solving the problem at all. And that's just the way this fucking country works.
Well, I'll tell you what, the reason that I wanted, this assembled troop of, as I said, friends and family to have this discussion was after I watched the Arizona Senate do less than nothing.
Thoughts and prayers, sir. Thoughts and prayers.
Wait, it was worse than that. It was worse than that. You take away a woman's right to choose, and then you also blame unwed mothers? What kind of insidious idiocy is that?
It's nonsense.
Yeah. Where's their father?
Not only would this disproportionately affect minorities, like trying to actually confiscate weapons, but also, even if you somehow did, like Thanos, snap all guns out of existence, you wouldn't be able to stop people from making new guns. I personally have known people who can make an AR-15 in their garage. That they can just do that. You can 3D print guns. And that also means that this is also going to disproportionately affect poor people and minorities, because then you're going to have your white homeowner conservative who's got a garage, all the, tools that he needs, a 3D printer, and he can make guns all he wants.
Well, you don't even need the 3D printer. There's plenty of old country boys out there who know how to make their own firearms without just things you can buy at Home Depot ultimately.
And prisoners in literal prisons can still make zip guns. If under that much, we're talking about trying to take guns away from people in their own homes without literal guards and cameras and snitches and every other thing that a prison has to prevent that exact thing from happening. And we can't prevent that exact thing from happening in that controlled of an environment. Why would you think you could control it in the entire US? You can't. It's impossible. We can talk about it from like a hypothetical standpoint to measure the pros and cons and the ethics of it, but ultimately it's just not something that could feasibly be done.
So, Ulfürst, have you exhausted your list?
No, I could go on probably for days though, so I'll just stop here.
All right.
It's one of those things. It's one of those things where, like, I am. You mentioned earlier, I crave conflict. I am exactly the kind of person who, were life different, I could easily have ended up being part of the problem. And as a result, I feel this like obligation to constantly second guess myself on this and be like, well, but what if there is a way that I'm wrong and actually we should just ban all the guns? And then I look into it and I'm like, oh, wait, no. But what if, no. But how about, no.
Oh. All right. Jim, next to my son. I think,
watch this, Ulfürst. Okay, put me on the clock. 30 seconds. Here we go. I'm just busting balls. Okay. I like the ideas. This has been really enlightening. And of course, Amber Alert just comes on my phone. Okay. Up in the age limit. Yes, orange thing. Oh, you got it too? Yeah. Increase the how stringent the background checks are. Psychological exam. I'm liking that. The waiting period Ulfürst talked about. I'm loving that. A lot of proposals are for 28 days. Great. I'm all for that. I am tired of seeing kids die. We got to do something. Atheist Edge, you can find me anywhere. June 7th, I've got Matt Dillahunty, Godless Granny, and comedian Tracy Barkley. We're going to talk about Ricky Gervais, that last Netflix special, and more broadly, cancel culture, whatever that is. And that's June 7th. How long did that take?
Oh,
Was that 30 seconds?
I've got one more. De-arm the police.
I think Jim was trying to make a point that's sort of.
I'm busting balls, man. It's good info.
I'm serious though. Actually, de-arm the police. I like it. Not all the time. Maybe have still like SWAT.
What do you want?
Thing.
Bicycle bobbies with billy clubs?
Well, think about it. How many people get shot in America every year by cops? They're trained to shoot you. They are trained to think with their fucking guns. And only 4% of their job is actually responding to violent crime in any way.
Okay, well, I'll give you
4%.
this. When I was a little kid, we had a thing called the SWAT team. And you know it by a different name. You call it the police.
Yep. And that in turn is part of the problem.
Demilitarize the police and defund the police. Make our default response to everything in America not dudes with guns, because currently our default response to everything is dudes with guns. And when the state has as its default response to everything dudes with guns, why are we surprised that civilians see the solution to problems as dudes with guns?
Well, all of our TV does that and always has. I mean, I got to tell you, when I was a little kid in the 1970s, I mean, I would watch like a lot of PBS because I mean, I got tired of watching any American show. If it's a drama, if it's an action kind of thing, it's always going to be a car chase and a gunfight. Always, every show. And I just got tired of that one theme being rehearsed over and over again. At least when you watch BBC, there would be something different. And then there was an American version of Doctor Who, and of course, when America did a Doctor Who episode, the one movie that they did, it's full of car chases and gunfights and heavy religious overtones.
And somebody in the chat just said, wait until I need an armed police response to help me. For one, I said that they should still, in that 4% of cases where they have to respond to violent crime, they should have guns then. But also, I've needed cops with guns to come and save me from imminent threats to my life before, and they didn't show up. So I don't feel any different about it. Sorry.
Yeah, and somebody in the chat
saved me.
you called my attention back to the chat, and somebody there called me a communist. If that were the case, I would admit it, but it is not the case. I am not a communist, so please do not misrepresent me. I'm not even sure that I'm a socialist. I think I'm a capitalist who believes in having social programs, and that the social programs and our capitalism should kind of like restrain each other. That's the kind of situation that I would like to see. Cooper Gates for $5 says, why aren't cops taught escalation of force like military? The first 4 steps are not supposed to be lethal. It is curious to me when I watch when I watch an 80-year-old man in a wheelchair being shot by 5 cops. I wonder how necessary that really was. Anyway.
Becky D said no knock should be illegal. Yes, it should, but also like the difference between cops doing no knock raids versus knock raids is like 5 seconds. They go and then bust in your door. So like there's functionally no difference. You can't enforce it. You can't stop them.
All right, Jim, did you cover everything expeditiously as you said? Okay. All right, Kurgan, I'm going to give you the last word.
All right. Well, really, I just want to touch on the fact that Ulfürst is right about one thing. Trying to confiscate all the weapons that are out there in America today is an impossibility. I watch another gentleman's YouTube channel. And
the 5th column.
Yes, sir. And he did an interesting one the other day that pointed out something very simple. If you were to have a child today and you raised the age to purchase a firearm to 21, your child, if a firearm was confiscated one a minute, your child would be 500 years dead after his 21st birthday before you got them all. It's not possible. So we have to find a way to make it work with what we have. Pandora's box is already open, and we're not stuffing it back in.
I've got a recommended viewing list for people if they're interested in.
I gave him the last word. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to go ahead and close it out. Thank you for everybody in the chat. This was brilliant and much appreciated.
Thank
All
you.
right.